This isn't a self-help show. It's a soul remembering. I'm Cynthia Sharp, educator, trauma-informed practitioner, proud mom to a son with Down syndrome, and vice president of Additional Needs Incorporated. I created Down to Heal because too many of us are told to survive and never taught how to heal. This is where we change that. Every other week, I sit down with parents, practitioners, neurodivergent voices, and body-based wisdom keepers. We talk about what really heals: nervous system regulation, somatic truth, community care, and the stuff you don't hear in the mainstream. Because healing isn't talked down, it's shared, it's messy, it's sacred. If you've lived it, studied it, questioned it, or been broken by it, this is the space for you. Down to Heal is a space I wish I had, honest, whole, and held. We're not here to fix. We're here to feel, reflect, and rise together. Listen on Spotify or YouTube. Let's get down to heal. Have you been told that IEPs are daunting, that the process is a battle, and that you have to fight? What if that weren't the case? What if you could walk into your very first IEP meeting informed, confident, and fully prepared to lead? What if you could take charge of the process and rewrite the story for your child? On this episode of Down to Heal, we show you exactly how. I'm joined by seasoned advocate Wilbur Hawke, who brings over 30 years of experience guiding families through special education. Together, we uncover the truths most parents never hear early enough. Informed consent, least restrictive environment, documentation, and the mindset that turns uncertainty into clarity. Whether you're a mom, a dad, or a caretaker stepping into this world for the first time, this episode equips you with the knowledge and confidence you deserve. Well, hello, Wilbur. How are you today?
How are you doing?
I am wonderful. So thank you for joining me on Down to Heal, doing this podcast where we get to talk about the IEP process and especially our own personal journey and how you came into that alongside us writing that and helping us navigate that. And hopefully today we get to pay it forward to another additional needs family new to the process and also being able to help them along.
Wonderful. Thank you for the invitation.
So if you would please, would you elaborate and tell everyone who you are and what brought you into advocacy?
My name is Wilbur Hawke. I'm with the South Florida Parent Center. That's me. I got involved through the need to advocate for my own child many, many years ago, 30 years ago or more. And through that effort of advocating for him, I was very successful in getting his needs met. So consequently, I just kept going on and sharing that other information with other parents to help them better advocate for their own children.
And you made it a profession where we got to employ your services and pick your brain on a step-by-step basis, specifically regarding our son's educational journey. And there were a lot of things that you helped us through. So let's start at the very beginning. You know, the IEP process. Here in the state of Florida, we were evaluated by fiddlers, and he was developmentally delayed until at age 6, they actually put the diagnosis. One of the most integral parts of the IEP process that I didn't realize, and I'm going to kind of skip forward to come back to this, is that in the IEP process, besides reading the procedural rights, right, and safeguards, there's a spot in the IEP that says, I give right, the right to a modified education, correct?
Yes, you have to give consent to modify the curriculum. And once you modify the curriculum, you're not learning the same things at the same rate as other children are. And so it tends to push then into a more self-contained setting and not into a gen ed setting. So you have to understand that anytime as a parent you give your consent, there's a little word that goes in front of that consent, and it's informed. So never give your consent for anything unless you have a full, complete understanding of what you're doing and what the ramifications of giving your consent are. But you can also rescind your consent and take that back if you don't have that informed consent part. So you can always rescind your consent. You can give it, you can take it back. You can make your consent conditional. I give my consent for this, this, and this, but not this and this. So consent is very important in understanding what you're giving that consent for, because the ramifications of the family, as you learned, are a bit extensive there.
They certainly are. And, you know, navigating the IEP process as an educator, which I was for 5 years, is a very completely different process coming into it as a parent, sitting down and realizing you're outnumbered at the meeting. And it's rather intimidating. It's supposed to be that way, right? Because it is a legal document. And I think so many people take that for granted when it comes to their child's education. And I really, really appreciated being able to lean on you extensively in that regard, to have you help me with the legal jargon. And that one phrase, the informed consent for modified curriculum, was the biggest hiccup at age 4 when he was in Head Start going into kindergarten, and I didn't want modified curriculum, yet I didn't understand that phrase, and it glossed over me. And we wouldn't have, our IEP meeting would have been a lot different at that point. It was a 4-hour meeting for the, you know, that time. And he entered kindergarten the way that I didn't want it. So this is why we're doing this, so that other parents can learn and go, okay, let me comb through this a little more diligently. I reached out to you because at the time that he was in first grade, I had already asked for ABA therapy to be started from Head Start into kindergarten, and they kept on pushing me off and saying he's not showing any behaviors because he was in a contained classroom. And it wasn't until the end of the year that he started showing some behaviors. And the following year, we had a newbie teacher, lucky us, who didn't have good behavioral strategies, to be perfectly honest. And it really came out in his behavior. And what I was able to manage, I no longer was able to manage. And it became an issue not only for him, also for his peers. So I called you in desperation going, Wilbur, I need help.
I get a lot of desperation. But,
right.
you know, it's that procedural process, and it is parents learning from other parents. It's how I learned, talking to other parents. And it's always been that way since the laws were passed. In education, the Handicapped Act, which is IDEA and the IEP, that was 1975. Section 504 was 1973. That's a long time ago. And since parents just like us actually had to go to court, fight these things, and you have all this case law that the courts made that decision exactly what the law means. so we don't have to go out there and try to interpret. However, you should have been made aware before you placed exactly what modified curriculum was, what you were giving consent for, and what those ramifications would be for. Unfortunately, if you don't get that information, as you well learned, where you get the best, and I use the best as a term loosely, behavior role models are in gen ed, where you get that speech role model, gen ed. It's not in that self-contained class. And as soon as possible, you need to start planning for transition. What's going to happen when your kid's not at school anymore? And even though they're just a little kid, you're still planning for that by integrating them into the gen ed population, the school population, because once you graduate, there's not a self-contained world out there. It's a world of diversity, and your child has to fit in that if they're going to be successful. And children with disabilities can go on and they can get college degrees and be very successful. But that training and those building blocks happen now. They happen in kindergarten, pre-K, and first grade. And you have friends. My son was deaf and hard of hearing, but I have the best story about what inclusion really means. When he was in the third grade, he was at Tommy Barfield Elementary, and he wore hearing aids that were behind his ears. And some fifth graders come up behind him and start flicking his hearing aids. And that upset him and it made him cry. But before the teacher could interact, the whole third grade class came to his rescue and drove the bullies off. So that's inclusion and being a part of that. And from the very beginning, I always insisted, even though deaf, hard of hearing is a low incidence disability, I always said that he needed to be there with other kids. If he was out in the middle of center field during a little league and picking daisies out there because he was so far out, he still had the same hat as everybody else. He still had the same uniform as everybody else. And he got to sit on the bench with everybody else. So that you have to create those opportunities and continue to, that he has that equal access for everything, not just one thing, across the board. Give me equal. And that's what you have to do as a parent. To do that, you have to understand the procedural process set forth in the law, how to get those things. And that's what I did. And that's what I still like to do. I like to teach because I think you're doing a real disservice to a parent if you're out there doing it for them, because you're creating a dependency on somebody else to do what you as a parent have the skills to do. Maybe not in the beginning when we first talked, but since then you've acquired an immense amount of skill. And I don't think there's anything that you can't do to get the services that your child needs.
It's funny, I was just thinking about you as I was preparing for this meeting and saying, you know, the open house was just last night in his first year of high school. And just last week, I had asked for some classes, and some parents were asking me, you know, how are you, Cynthia? How do you like this year so far? And I could tell that they were a little amiss or whatever they were feeling. That was my interpretation. And I said, I'm good. And they're like, really? And I'm like, well, yeah, I know that the schedule is going to change. You know, he's going to have like 3 classes, one in integrated science and 2 other electives where he's in with the general ed population. And they're like, well, how did you do that? I asked.
And ask the questions. So
right.
It's not a shame to not know, but it is a shame not to ask. And so we've had things in the past with integrated biology and math where it's co-teaching. So we actually had two teachers, a regular education teacher and a special education teacher, which is your case manager. Rather than pulling children out and making them separate from, you push the services into the classroom. And there's a thing called incidental benefit. And that's if your child, if their need is met, if you have an aide in the classroom or a special education teacher, once that need is met from your child, the other children in the classroom can receive that benefit from having that service in gen ed. So it's not just shoving your child in and dumping them into a regular education environment. They need to have all the supports and services so we don't set them up for failure, but set them up for success. And I will tell you, and you can tell me if it's true or not, but I know that once you get it right, once you wrote that IEP and you got it correctly, and he had all the services that he needed, you see your child blossom. You can see them grow. You get it right. They come home happy. They want to go to school. And that's getting it right through the IEP process. And then when I got it right for my son, I could tell that that's what he needed because he was happy, he was being successful. And all through his career, you're always going to go back to that IEP, that process that you're going to do. It's repetitive. You'll do it from now until he either exits with a standard diploma or ages out at 22. And that's going to look differently as you go, but it's still that end result of what's going to happen when I can't send him to school. And you certainly don't want him sitting on your couch until he's 30. You want him to be gainfully employed so that he can live independently as possible and pursue a quality life of his own choosing. And
Absolutely.
That's the planning that you do now and you'll continue to do until we access the school system. We all do that as parents. But to do that, you can't make an informed choice unless you have all the information. That's always been my goal. My son was subjected to a tremendous bus ride from Marco to North Fort Myers. And they said that's what he needed, but it wasn't true. And I didn't have that information. If I'd had that information, my son, my family would never have to be subjected to that, what he had to go through. So since that day forward, it's always been my goal to make information accessible to parents. Because once you have that information, then you have the tools that you need to effectively advocate for your child. Without that, you don't.
So I remember in the very, very beginning, reading this procedural safeguards and knowing what I needed to do, yet going to the front office of the school and saying, I need a copy of the IEP, not understanding that I needed to talk to the ESE specialist to get it. And unfortunately, the front desk personnel had no idea that I could get the IEP ahead of time. So hence why we're starting from ground zero. If you're starting at ground zero, there is an individual at the school that you need to speak with that will handle the IEP process and will guide you more or less alongside. So hopefully we can touch base on all the points of what needs to transpire. The school will submit paperwork to you to ask you as parents what your concerns are on academics and social emotional behaviors. And you find, Wilbur, that parents do that more or less?
If you talk to me, I make sure that one of the things you do is to put, when you said you talk to them, no, we don't talk to them. We put things in writing and we submit things in writing so it's documented. There's a paper trail. That's important. You just can't pick up the phone, make a request, because if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. So understanding that procedural process, making all of those requests in writing, and it's starting from initial evaluation and understanding what that is and how to ask for it. And there's plenty of some sample letters out there that can help you, because you're not the first and you're not the last. So the best thing that you can do as a parent of a child with a disability is learn from those that go before you, duplicate their successes, and avoid their mistakes. So that networking portion is crucial, that you talk to other parents, those that have been there, that have already done that stuff. I'm one of those. I don't think there's anything I haven't done more than once. And it just does my heart good to see the young ones like you start stepping up and taking those roles of leadership, because that's what it has to happen. It happened with me. There was somebody that I reached out to. Matter of fact, his name was Francis Flood, and he was from the Advocacy Center, which is now Disability Rights. And what a relief it was to talk to somebody that knew what I was talking about and had some answers and gave me some guidance and put me down that right track, where to find that information. Once I had the information, the first thing I did was file a complaint with the Office for Civil Rights based on that length of time on a bus, and my child was returned. And a little boy who was never going to read above a third grade level because he was deaf. And folks, we really got to watch stereotyping, because it does more harm than good. So he was never going to read above a third grade level, but he graduated high school honors AP courses with an AB average, went on to do 2 years of college, now married and living independently in North Carolina with 2 sons of his own. Had I listened to what the typical thought process was with kids who were deaf, hard of hearing, he would have never been as successful as he is. So as parents, you're the advocate for your child. That's your role. That's your responsibility. And never, ever get to that point where you let somebody tell you that they can't. Because the thing that kept me going year after year after year after year is just when you said they can't, they do. They do it. And the one thing, they'll make liars of professionals consistently. And so as a parent, you need to be that one that pursues it. I'm sure you were told that it was never going to happen. And that
You were right there in the meetings.
Oh, and if you believe that and you didn't advocate for it, I told you up front exactly how it was going to be based on experience. And that's something that you need from another parent, because you're not going to get it from a professional, but you need it from another parent that said, this is the reality of how things are, how they're going to be, and you need to be the one to step up and make that change. And he's going to be very successful. He's in high school already. I can see him going to college, and there's programs out there that'll take it.
Exactly. So you helped so much, because parents, I know we're a pretty regulated couple. It's a very dysregulating, emotionally dysregulating process, right? To enter IEP meetings and hear how awful your child is, how they're not meeting goals, how they're not allowed to diagnose. Yet I had a school psychologist diagnose my son with I believe it was ADHD, and I was just like, interesting. And I remember her saying, you can never change that, because she knew I was into biofeedback, which is retraining the brain. And I just had to sit there and bite my tongue, because I just knew better, and yet, had to refrain from being unprofessional, because I'm caring for my son. And I think that's a really hard point and thing for parents to do, to not bring their emotions into a business meeting about their child. So what I appreciated was your guidance for the step-by-step process of what may come about to put yes, instead of just talking to them, to go ahead and sorry, I'm getting a notification, to really put everything in writing and get it all out and put it so that I ended up having to get the district involved because the school was not listening to me. And that's when I was really reaching out to you going, okay, I had asked for ABA therapy and an FBA, functional behavioral assessment for ABA therapy, because I could tell my son's behaviors were going to exacerbate in an educational setting. I knew as a parent, like if he could get away with something, he would, or if he could redirect their attention, he would, because he's really good at reading people, right? Yet I walked in, and after being told that he's not exhibiting any of the behaviors, there he was exhibiting behaviors, and I'm needing your support. And you helped my husband step by step, and we went through 7 IEP meetings together. That was a lot of time on your behalf.
I'm not counting, but the thing is, parents, we have to learn, and as difficult as it may be, and I do a lot of work with dads, and dads are different than moms, but we have to learn how to do non-emotional, clearly documented, collaborative business, not personal. It's just business. And preparing for the meeting and asking for that draft copy of the IEP before you get there, putting everything in writing so they know what it is you want before you ever get to the table. But the IEP process itself includes everything. Anytime somebody says he needs, then I would go, thank you. Let's either write a goal or let's make an accommodation. If it's a skill he can be taught, then let's write a goal for that. But if it's part of his disability, you can't unteach that. So therefore, that's an accommodation. So it's either a goal or it's accommodation. And as parents, and you did the same thing, you don't tell them how to do it. You tell them what he needs. And in the instance under the domain of social emotional in the IEP, you either put a goal or an accommodation to deal with the behaviors that you're seeing. And any behavior that impedes with a child's ability to learn needs to be addressed in the IEP. It's under that domain of social emotional, you add those goals. And that's what we ended up doing at the IEP. I believe it was eloping was one of them in the early days. Is that correct?
Say that again.
Elopement.
Yes, that is correct. Yep. The peace out, I'm out of here on board.
Yeah. So yeah. You can't pick the methodology, which you were going, I want ABA therapy. That's methodology. And methodology is the school district's responsibility to select what works or doesn't work. Your job as a parent was to track that progress. Okay, this is what he needs. How are you going to report that progress back to me to ensure that that need is met? So if you do that and you just monitor that progress continuously, because we don't wait to the end of the year to determine we are or are not making progress. We do it quarterly, and we look at the mastery level of what they're saying it takes. If it takes a child with the goal that they have a mastery of 80%, where is he now? Is he 0%? Is he 10%? Then we come up on a quarter of the school year and we're looking at reporting on that progress. Where is he? Well, if the mastery level is 80%, we're a quarter of the way through the school year, we better be at 20%. And there should be some concrete evidence and data that you can show me, even student demonstration, that he's doing it. And then if we're any time during the school year, we're not on track to meet that mastery level, as a parent, you have a right then to request in writing an IEP meeting. And then it's time to go in and look at your team and say, look, he's not going to master this goal. He needs more or he needs different. Because the baseline is a 6-hour school day, whatever time he's getting with a teacher, with a special education teacher, with a speech therapist, whoever's responsible for that goal, we need more because he's not going to make it. And anytime you write a goal, goals are measurable and achievable. So if you write a goal, you're saying you're going to achieve it with a period of 1 year. So from the time you write that goal, at the end of the school year, it should be done. And through that progress, you're measuring so that if you get through the first quarter and you're not at 20%, then you're going to have to say, I need more because we are not progressing. And it
Makes sense.
It's just progress. It's need and progress. So measure, measure, measure. And when you evaluate, it does two things. The first thing it does is it either makes you eligible. So you have to have that evaluation to determine eligibility initially. And you have to give your consent for that evaluation, and you have to give your consent for the initial placement. Beyond that, it's whenever it's reevaluated, and the school district then has the obligation to continue to develop the IEP at least once a year, but there's no limit to the frequency of the meetings to write an IEP. You can have as many of those meetings that you need. It says mutually agreed upon times and places. So it's not a summons. So if they say we're going to have an IEP meeting on Wednesday at 3:00, you may say, well, that's a day I got my nails scheduled for. So we're going to have to pick another day. And then in writing, you give them different choices for scheduling the meeting. This day is good for me, and this day is good for me. And dad can make it on this day with me. So this is when I want to have my IEP. So the law requires that you as a parent, your observations of your child hold equal weight to any and all school testing. You know what's best for your child because you know your child the best. And so parents need to be at these meetings. They need to understand what they are, and they need to be able to have a clear understanding to meaningfully participate. So ask those questions and ask them again. And if you don't get an answer, give me a call and I'll explain it to you.
One of the hardest parts was when they did the functional behavioral assessment. And after doing so, recommended him being put into an IBI, which I can't tell you what the IBI stands for.
Intense behavioral interventions.
Intense behavioral interventions. There you go. And I had already seen an IBI, yet Doug hadn't. So we went and we checked it out. And they wanted us to make a decision at that point. And I remember it was almost so disarming and so not in a good way. It was just, we walked onto the campus, the assistant principal met us, and when I started asking questions about the IBI unit, she didn't have any answers. And I just felt like, like the phrase of like the redheaded stepchild, like, you know nothing about this program. And when we went, it felt like it's in the back of the school. Okay. even more. And then we walk in and it's dead silent. And we have a nonverbal child. And okay, so he's going to get more silence, and we're asking for him to speak. And we're trying to figure out why he's not speaking. And it was before the speech pathologist inside the school and outside the school had diagnosed him as having apraxia. And it was just disheartening, is really what it was. Then coming back and saying, having a letter put in front of us saying, basically, we're bad parents because we're not aligning with the school district's decision, unanimous decision that,
Parent too.
huh?
I guess
Right?
that's being a bad parent too.
And just going, wow, okay, we're going against the educator's decisions on what is best for our child, and we're having to go ahead and sign off. Now, fortunately, because of your support that year and the multiple hours per those 7 IEP meetings, I mean, one of them was 7, almost 8 hours long, that we did get him at the end of the year we revoked consent for the modified curriculum at that time. You gave us the go ahead, okay, you don't want him in the IBI, fine, you get to revoke and rescind your consent. And it was just like, is it really that simple? And thank God we had you, because I think we would have been like, is this like some kind of like bad joke? Like, that's all we have to do. And we did, and they were like, the behavioral analyst at that time looked at us and said, well, there's no way that he'll succeed. Well, great. Now you figure out how he's going to succeed in that classroom.
Based on what?
Based on his behaviors and the number of documented, right?
You know, where they come up with the conclusion he'll never be able to succeed based on what? And if you say this, then I need more or I need different. You know, you just keep going back to getting that need met. And unfortunately, there's lots of things that get said, like least restrictive environment. When somebody says, and I've heard it a dozen times, well, if you give them an aid, it's not the least restrictive environment, which is an asinine statement, because an aid is a related service that allows them to be in gen ed and benefit from the instruction. So related service do 2 things. They support a goal or they support access. So it's making sure that your child has all of those things, which if you read it, because I think I'm a smart guy, but still read it for yourself. And it says that, you know, for least restrictive environment to the maximum extent appropriate, a child with a disability shall be taught alongside their non-disabled peers with use of supplementary aids and services that are non-exhaustive, and cost is never a factor. So what have you done in the form of those supplementary aids before you come up with the conclusion that my child needs not to be in the least restrictive environment, being taught along his non-disabled peers? What have you tried? Because the law requires that it's not a token gesture. It really has to be a good faith effort. You really have to try to put kids in gen ed setting. Not everybody gets that, and not every regular education teacher is that open to having a child with a disability in the classrooms. But, you know, being included is a right, not a privilege for a select few. So it's a right under 2 federal laws, under IDEA. Don't get me up on the soapbox today, because it's been that way. It was that way when I started 30 years ago. Why are we still doing the same things over and over and over again? Their parents lost their homes taking this Supreme Court decisions. Rachel Holland out of California, Daniel Ramirez out of New Mexico, the Oberti, all those are cases, and they have case law. They establish case law. So when somebody's telling me those things and saying least restrictive environment, well, you need to be talking about time you're taught, because lunch is a given, field trips is a given, hallways are a given. All of those things are a given. That's just equal access. That's the ADA. I have that right. Section 504 as well. You know, that I have that access just like anybody else. What it says, and you can read it yourself, as adequately as my non-disabled peer, period. So if your child without a disability can do it, my child with a disability can also do it with all this help and all the supplementary services, related services that they need. So it's establishing the need, understanding that what your rights are, and it's your role to become that advocate. That's your job as a parent. To do that, you need the information. Without it, you're never going to be effective. Once you understand what that law is and how to apply it, then you're going to see the growth. You're going to see the needs being met. But you have this wonderful set of procedural safeguards, and I know we had this conversation as well, is that you sit in that meeting and there's all these folks in there, a dozen of them at the table, all of them have degrees, all of them have a discipline specialty that they're coming to this, and you just feel overwhelmed with, you're intimidated by all these people that are sitting at the meeting. But you're the one that needs to speak up, because you know the child more than they do. And they will ask you, they take that little sheet of paper that says, these are your procedural safeguards, and they hand them to you. And they go, Cynthia, do you understand them? And you, oh yeah, I understand them. When you didn't have a clue. You just say that because you know you're intimidated and you just want to get on with the meeting. Those things in those procedural safeguards are there to protect you. That's why they're called safeguards. And one of those is prior written notice. Anytime a school district refuses to take an action regarding the education of your child, you can ask for prior written notice of refusal, prior written notice of the proposal, and it puts it in writing. So that is part of one of those procedural safeguards under notice. These things you really need to know. I can remember, you know, I let them put my little boy on a bus and ship him to Fort Myers in the 3rd grade. That should have never happened if I would have asked the questions, but I did. So hindsight, when I look at that and all the years that I've been teaching, I do that because parents need to step up and they need to ask, and they need to continue to ask throughout their education. How can my son access that? How can he access those after-school programs that are available in high school? Because he should be able. Sports,
and
anything.
Yes, and I did last night, and yes, that will be made available. So yes, I just want to let people know, yes. Okay, so we went into the IEP, we rescinded our consent for a modified curriculum, which meant that they needed to go ahead and provide support, and they needed to document whether or how well with the support his behaviors reduced in the gen ed classroom versus the modified curriculum. And we found value in his being integrated into general education. The behaviors actually went down. And I'm sharing this for the additional needs community parents because it wasn't comfortable. The special education teacher wasn't kind to us at all. It was a very difficult, tumultuous time, not just for us. It was tumultuous for Jack during that time. He was stressed. And yet he kept on going, and so did we. When we met a principal of a school that we wanted to go ahead and go to, and we sat down and spoke with him during that year. He flat out looked at us and said, it's going to take you about 3 years to get him here. I don't have the money. Our school doesn't have a special ed program. The only way is for you to advocate and get the funds from that school to bring them over. With your assistance, we did it by the end of the school year. So that's me high-fiving you.
The money follows the child. I've had
Right.
a very wonderful career, and I've been able to do many things and meet people in the disability community that are rock stars. I mean, the things that they did and the changes that they made were phenomenal. And twice I was asked, and it's by invitation only, to participate in the National Council on Disabilities, their education committees at 2 different conferences. And the National Council on Disabilities, they give guidance to the president and Congress on disability. And there were 2 things that our education committee came up with that were actually put into law. So I actually can say that. I know everybody does. But the one was the word informed in front of consent. So our subcommittee put that in so that the school districts would have to tell you everything if they wanted your consent. And the second thing was neutral funding, which became national with part of the law. So that when you sit down at the beginning of the IEP and you start determining what the child needs, then that's transferred into the matrix of services, which then transfers the dollars. And before this, the more restrictive setting a child with a disability was placed in, the more money the school got for that child. So consequently, that pushed kids into self-contained classes because there was more money over there for the child. So by having the matrix of services put into play, and that was national, you determine in the beginning, what does that child need? Then no matter where they go, gen ed, anywhere, the dollars follow the child. So when they come into the classroom, and you can never tell me that you don't have money, because there is a Supreme Court case, Rachel Holland. You can go look it up if you want. It was California. And the school district said that it would cost too much money to educate Rachel in a regular education environment. That's the school. So it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And when it got to the Supreme Court, they looked at it and they said, it's not fair to just put what it cost to educate Rachel against the special education budget. So we have to do it against the entire budget for all of the county that she was being, to say it's Orange County in California. So that was millions and millions of dollars. And so you have to take that against that budget, and you have to say that what it takes to educate Rachel in that regular education environment, if it's for it to be so cost prohibitive, you have to subtract that from that entire school budget out there, millions of dollars, and it has to significantly impact each and every child in that school district to be deemed too costly. You could gold plate a Cadillac and set it in front of the school, and it would still not be cost prohibitive. So never ever cost is a factor. It's already been to the Supreme Court. They already ruled on it. You can't say that, yet we still do. And if you don't know as a parent and you believe that, and I hear it over and over again, and sometimes I just have to speak up and go, that's not true. Well, that's not true. That doesn't make it popular, but still, it's not true. And you have to really know, I know in my position in the years that I've done this, you have to know, and you can't be wrong because you're discredited if you are. So I had to always make sure that I was correct. There's a clearinghouse out there that you can probably give your listeners the link to sometime. It's called the Center for Parent Information and Resources. CIPR, Center for Parent and Information and Resources. What I really love about this website is it's a national clearinghouse, and it's run out of the Parent Center out of New Jersey. And you can go in and Google anything we've been talking about, the IEP process, least restrictive environment, and it'll come up and it'll have that explanation in a manner to which a parent can read and understand. But what it also gives you is the Code of Federal Regulations statute. So it gives you right in the federal law where it says where they're getting that information from. So you can't really contest federal law. It is what it is. Federal law supersedes state law or district policy or school board policy. It's federal law. And I've always been a stickler for looking, what does that say? And then there's times I've had to file against districts and file against the state because they got it wrong. You know, they had the state law, which was conflicting with federal law, and you can't have that. They can't conflict. Federal law must match everything. There's so many things out there that's parents you can tap into. One of them is called a Special Programs and Procedural Manual. Now, so I get this way. I'm making Cynthia's head hurt already. But it's how our school district, our school board, every 3 years has to put in writing through this Special Programs and Procedural Manual how they're going to implement the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, Section 504, exactly how they're going to do that. They have to put that in writing, and then it has to be approved by the school board and then sent to Tallahassee before they get any money. So they have to do this, put it in writing, and it's approved by the school board. The most important thing in that whole thing is it was approved by the school board. So if your school board approved it, then that Special Programs and Procedural Manual is actually school board policy. So if you're not doing something, then the SP&P, you have the right to go ask your school board why it's not being done. Since it's their policy, why aren't you enforcing your own policy? Why is this particular building over here not doing exactly what's in that policy? That makes sense.
Thank you for sharing that. That makes sense. So because we were talking federal versus state, what are some items that the state, if we talk about like the IEP process and someone from Florida moves to like Alabama or another state, what are some key items that the state rules on?
Well, you look at things that are state discretionary, and one of those is when you age out, for example. So the school district has the option of saying, well, it's when they turn 21, or it's the year that they turn 21. So you could do that. The matrix of services that we talked about, that was discretionary. You have to do it, but you can have your own model. In Florida, transition is at 12 now. You can do more than federal law. You just can't do less. So if federally it was 16, now we're down to 12, or maybe it was 14 and now we're down. So we're doing more than what the state is. Early intervention is not mandated. It's discretionary. So states have to agree and to do it, to take the money and provide those services to kids Berkeley 2. And then once they turn 3, they go into the public school system. But it's understanding that within each state, there are things that are discretionary for the state to make that choice and how they're going to do that. but it can never, ever be less than what the federal requirements are. So you can do more, but you can't do less.
So I remember us being very, thank goodness I have a very grounded husband, that we often held hands underneath the table and we would squeeze each other's hands when we would be upset with someone across the way from us. What do you recommend for families, or what have you often seen in attending virtually all the IEP meetings that you have seen? What are some challenges families face in the IEPs, and what do you suggest to stay grounded?
You have to have thick skin and just kind of let things that are not important roll off. But it's that preparation that you do before you get to the table. So it's not personal, it's just business. And you need to get prepared by asking for that copy of the IEP and going over and sitting down with your husband. You have a different way you see your child than he does. So you need to sit down together and you make that list of parent concerns together. And if they get to the point to where at a certain age, you need to start asking the student to put their concerns in writing. What's bothering you? What do you think you need? And let's put that down. And I have a story on my own son, since we're sharing today. I was super advocate back in the day, so my kid's in high school and we're having an IEP meeting, and I show up with idea in one pocket, 504 in the other, got the ADA in the back pocket, and I'm going for real-time captioning. Everything that comes out of that teacher's mouth is supposed to come up on a screen on a laptop in front of my son. That's what I wanted, So we're sitting at the table and I'm putting the proposal out there, and we go around and we go clear around the table and we get to him. And I asked him, what do you want? And he said, I don't want any of it. I'll keep this, I'll keep that. I don't want the aid. I don't want this. I don't want the speech. All the services that I advocated for and had in place for this kid, all of them. And he just goes, I don't want any of them. So I had to walk the talk, because you teach self-advocacy and you want them to do that. So I said, well, if that's what you want, let's go and try it. We'll try it for a grading period and we'll come back and look at it later. And the hardest part of the whole thing wasn't the fact that my kid was going to give up those services. The hardest part was the smirks on all their faces at the table. Because I had nothing. I should have talked to him. I should have been prepared. I should have asked for his input, but I didn't. So consequently, Dad went home feeling a little silly. But came time for that grading period, he came home with his report card and he shoved it in my face, straight A's across the board. And he goes, maybe I need real-time captioning. Maybe I don't think so. And he was right. He was right. And I'll never forget that day. And they all were just grinning.
And I thought that was all for a girl.
Pardon me?
I thought it was all for a girl. I don't want all those services. I just want to be in class with a girl.
He didn't want to be followed around by an adult all day, so he ditched the aide right away. And he had that. She was an oral interpreter. So she was there for anything that he didn't hear, because he would miss so much out that. So
Right.
She had to fill in those gaps and make sure that he understood. They asked her one time in an IEP meeting, well, how can you tell when he needs you? She goes, he gives me that I need you look, because she was with him since elementary all the way through clear to high school. and together with him. And he said later on that he didn't really need her. You know, it was just easy to have her around. So you really got to talk to them ahead of the meetings and ask what they want, because it doesn't matter how much you give them. It's what will they use, not what you want, what you need, what will he use. And that's going to come that way. Girls are going to be a big thing with you when you hit the next couple of years here too. So
I think we've already hit those next couple of years already.
it's a fact. Kids with disabilities, they have the same things, the same wants, the same needs as everybody else in puberty and understanding sexuality. And the lucky thing that for you is that you're not the first. Somebody's already dealt with that. So if you go over to the Center of Parent Information and Resources and you do a search for sexuality training, and it'll come up. And when we talk about this network, this Center for Parent Information and Resources, there's federal dollars that go in the form of grants. And those grants are to form parent training and information centers. In the state of Florida, we have three of those grants that are run by the same organization out of Dunedin, Family Network on Disabilities. Worked for them for 20 years. But it's like all this information that's out there and it's available. There are 110 parent centers nationally, or were. So if you wanted to know what it's like to be able to reach in a community that's isolated, you contact the Montana PTI, and they can tell you, or a large city, Los Angeles or New York, or all those things are out there already for you to tap in, and they're free and they're paid for by the federal government. They have another special project, which is called CADRE, the Center for Appropriate Dispute Resolution in Education. And their whole thing is about not going to court and not fighting. So they have all these tools so parents can understand what their procedural safeguards, what mediation is, what facilitated IEP is, all of these things that are out there, and they have videos, and they're written by parents for parents. So tapping into that and understanding before you get there and they upset you and you break your husband's fingers under the table. We don't need that. We want to get ready. So
Right.
I'm always having parents, you write your concerns down, sit down together, sit down with your kid, put them all in writing, get them to them before the meeting, ask for that copy of the IEP so you can go through it. And if you see something you don't understand, highlight it. So when you're at that table, you have that list of parent concerns, that's your agenda. That's so you're sitting at the table and Jack came to school today and he had the cutest outfit on. And I don't know, where did you get that? Did you get that at Walmart? You lose focus. Having that agenda in front of you, you track it. And when you get to the end of that meeting, you had 10 things written down and 4 of them have not been addressed yet. If they're addressed, check them off. If you get to the end of the meeting and they have not been addressed, it's time to have another meeting. So you just schedule another meeting and come back and address those things that are on your list of parent concerns. And then it has to be in the IEP. If it's not in the IEP, you don't get it. An IEP is a legal binding commitment of service. Once it's written, you have to provide it. If you don't provide it, there's remedy through the state of Florida that you can get those services made up by filing a state complaint. All of those things are out there, but as a parent, you need to understand them, and you need to understand them very clearly. And you can testify the difference between not having the information and having it, and what the outcomes are, how different they are from when you were asking before and when you ask now. No reason ever to be rude. No reason ever to be angry. It's not personal. You just need to go in there with emotions under control and just everything in writing. No, understanding that right to written notice, that's a critical thing. and under one of the related services called parent training and counseling. So if they're doing FBA, functional behavioral assessment, they put a positive behavioral support plan in place, train me so I can do it at home. And I know there's parents out there who heard this, that when they say, well, we don't see those behaviors in school. Well, teach me, because I'm seeing them at home. Show me what you're doing in school, because at home I'm seeing these behaviors. Train me. Occupational therapy, speech therapy, parents are going out there and they're providing those services either out of their insurance or their own pocket after school when they should be provided in school. And if you teach me how to do it, I can do it at home. You know, kids need to get out of school. They need to come home, take their clothes off, be able to eat something and go play. They don't need to come home, get schlepped across the county for speech therapy or occupational therapy. If you need it, then look at your goals on your IEP, if it's either accessibility, or when you look at fine motor skills, because that's what occupational therapy is. And everything from toileting. One of the first things you do when you toilet is the pincer grip, when you grab your pants to pull them down. That's occupational therapy. So it would support that toileting goal, or handwriting, or shoe tying, or anything that takes fine motor. Then we look at the related services. And there's a really good paper out there on related services. On my website, I have what is called the Hawke Collection. And the Hawke Collection is 30 years. Parents would call me and I would go here and click on this, then go here and click on this. To make it easier on you and me, I put them all in one spot. And it's called the Hawke Collection. And that related service paper is in there. And it's one of the best things I ever read. I can remember so many times in my own advocacy, I would read something like that when I go, oh, light bulb's going off, you know, that's what I need to do it. You don't get them. They don't stand alone. If you want occupational therapy, you need to have a goal or an accommodation to get it. No goal, no accommodation, no related service, no specially designed instruction. But you don't get told those things in the beginning. You have to find them out. And how you find them out is exactly what you did, was you talked to another parent.
Right. So if there were 3 things that you would have a parent do prior to an IEP meeting, it would be talk to your spouse or your partner and or your child and write down all your concerns.
Every one.
Concerns. Okay. And then
that's your agenda.
Review the IEP, ask for it and review the IEP prior to the meeting.
Sit down and go over it. And if there's something you don't understand in that document, then you highlight that. Because that everything that you need is already in that IEP. There's a place for it. The teacher needs to be trained. Well, there's a section in the IEP that says supports for school personnel. So we go to that and we say, you know, the teacher needs to be trained in this augmentative communication device my kid's using. And then, you know, under parent counseling, I need to be trained too. So let's everybody train together. It's in the document. It's in that IEP, everything you need. Understanding that present levels of performance are just a baseline. So that beginning of the IEP, present levels of educational performance is the baseline. This is where we are. So that's what the goals are built on, from that baseline. Then you go to accommodation section. That's the effects of exceptionality. That's part of my child's Down syndrome. I can't unteach that. If you can unteach disability, let me know, because we'll make a lot of money and we can start with my son. We'll put him right up there on the first part. Doesn't happen. So those are accommodations. Anything that's disability related is an accommodation. Anything that can be taught in the form of a skill is a goal. And it all goes into that IEP, which is broken down into 4 domains. There's actually 5, but the goals are in the 4 domains: curriculum and learning, independent functioning, social, emotional, and communication. So if it's expressing wants and needs, it goes under communication. If it's behavioral in nature, under social, emotional. Anything that's curriculum based, of course, it says on its own. Independent functioning can be, and the law is very clear. It states, and you can read it, and they put it in there specifically because school districts were going, well, we don't need to teach that. Yes, you do. Academic and functional goals. So when you look at independent functioning, it could be toileting, feeding, zipping, dressing, tying shoes. All of those functional skills go under that domain. So you have those 4 domains. The 5th domain, there's no goals in it, but it's healthcare. So if your kid has a special diet, it goes in that domain. If they have medications that need to be administered, the peanut allergies, anything like that, that's a medical necessity, goes into that domain of healthcare on the IEP. And you write it not for a program, not for a classroom. So if you say, oh, we don't need to put that in the IEP, they do that in the class. Well, what happens if I move to Texas tomorrow? You need to have everything in the IEP, so whoever reads that IEP has a clear understanding of all the commitments of the school district to implement it. Everything they need in clear writing so you understand it. And that in itself doesn't always happen, but it should. Never happened to my IEPs, but mine to yours. But
So I know we've touched on 2 of them, writing down your concerns and on all 5 points, and then reviewing the IEP. What was a third that a parent should prepare for before walking in on the IEP meeting?
Well, it's once again, we talked about mutually agreed upon times and places. So, to where you're a team, you and Doug are a team.
Right.
So you want to be at that meeting together. You want to be able to schedule it where you both can be, and then you want to bring Dad up to speed. So many times, this mommy's club thing that I have a real issue with, dads get pushed out. They're not included. So as a father, I know I have to be the breadwinner. I have to go do this, I have to do that. But you can have an IEP meeting at noon, and I can conference in on my lunch break and put that information in writing under the parent concerns as well, to where we're all sitting together and we're talking about our child. And it's not just, I did the IEPs at my family. I liked it. So she could stay home. I'll take care of that. And I did. But once you understand it's a procedural process set forth in 2 federal laws, not just 1. If you have an IEP, you have an automatic 504 plan, because it's the accommodations that's folded into your IEP. So both laws apply if you have an IEP. You can have a 504 plan and not need specially designed instruction or special ed. You can just accommodations, but you can still get special ed if you need it. So it's understanding those services are critical for the success of your child. And if they don't have them, then you're not going to see the progress. But that, once back, we go back. We look at more or different. It's non-exhaustive. And when you look at a line of continuum of placement, I know this is a lot, and it's just how I roll, and you understand that. You've been exposed to me for quite some time now. Children are placed by law on what is called a line of continuum of placement. And it begins with gen ed with no service. And then it goes to gen ed with supports and services, resource room, self-contained classes, all the way on the end to therapeutic residential settings, if that's what's necessary to provide the child with an education. We always, no matter where we place, we're always pushing backward to that gen ed setting, because that's where they should start out. So it's only when your behavior is such that you're a danger to yourself or others, or your behavior is so disruptive to impede with the learning of others, that we look at moving you out of that gen ed setting. But to me, if you say we have behavior, what do you say?
Well,
Okay,
what do
let's do it. Let's evaluate. Let's get an FBA in. Let's do the behavior plan over. And the wonderful thing that we have as parents, one of those procedural safeguards, you said you understood but don't, is your right to an independent educational evaluation at public expense. So if you disagree with the behavior plan, it isn't working, you can ask for an independent educational evaluation. And if a school psychologist did the FBA, functional behavioral assessment, then you have the right to go outside the school system, find a school psychologist that has no school affiliation whatsoever, and have them do the same or similar tests, and the school district has to pay for that. They only have to consider it, but it really gives you another set of eyes at looking at, hey, we got problem behaviors and they're not able to do it. Let's get somebody else to come in and have a look at that. And then we'll put this plan in place. And it's always got to be data driven. Show me. One of the things that I always strive for is student demonstration. Show me he can do it. We all have these little smartphones and they all have cameras on them and everything. As a parent, if your child's at home and he's doing it, film it. Take it to the IEP meeting. And when we talk about present levels, look there, he can do that. We don't need to work on that goal. Let's add another goal, or let's make that one a little more intense, because he's already mastered that. And the same way with showing demonstration that he's able to do something at school. Here, just show me a little video of him doing it. That's student demonstration, and that means he's mastered that goal, and we can write more or move on from there. But it's a fluid, always changing document when we're talking about the IEP, because we're looking at the child, and as the child changes and grows. You don't have the same expectations you had in first grade and in ninth grade.
No, not at all.
And you should
when it comes,
you should be a little happy that you made it through middle school. But that's tough.
So when it comes to that independent evaluation, that same can be said of IQ exams or neurological evaluations.
Any testing you give your consent for. And once you give your consent, that you get entitled to an independent educational evaluation. The only way that they can deny you that right to a second opinion is to initiate a due process hearing, take you to court, and prove that they're correct. Well, as my son would say back in the day, Dad, when I first started out a long time ago, the cost of a due process hearing was $40,000. We had spent $3.5 million in legal fees taking parents to court. So we were very confrontational back then. So if you take that number of what it takes to go to court, it's cheaper just to do the independent. And as a school district, that's what we do. We grant them, and parents go and they get the independent, because the school district only has to consider it. They don't have to follow it. But it still gives you that second opinion, somebody else to look at it. And that's one of your procedural safeguards, that you have the right to do that. So if a behavior plan's not working and they go, we don't know what to do, let's get an independent. Or one of the things that we have done in the past here is if you contact the special ed department and say, look, it's not working here, I'll put my right to an independent on hold. I'm not giving up my right, but I'll delay it if you can get somebody else to come in and look at this. Because, we have some very qualified behavioral folks in the district. Bottom line, either it works or it doesn't work. And if it doesn't work, I want more.
So if a family feels that their child's needs aren't being fully met, even after an IEP meeting, what are their options for recourse?
Well, it depends. The first thing is you have to ask which needs are not being met. If your goals on your IEP are measurable, which are required to be and obtainable, if you're not making that progress, then we ask for another IEP and we need more or different. You can't hear me? That could be just as well. You were hearing me fine before, correct? All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, you could have went, yep. I can hear you. Yeah, it happens. Technology is a wonderful thing until it doesn't work. It happens all the time. So I don't know where you missed or anything else.
Basically, as soon as I asked, what is their recourse, and you went into it, I was like, oh shoot, I can't hear you.
So if we're not making that progress, then we reconvene your IEP. So you're always reconvening the IEP. That's called evaluation criteria on how we measure we're making that progress. So when you look at that evaluation criteria on how we're doing that, it needs to be, it can't be subjective. It needs to be concrete, that when you're looking at it. So not just a teacher's observations, that doesn't work. Student demonstration, that is concrete. Or teacher given tests or something to where you can show me that I'm making that progress. So if I'm not making the progress, then I need to go back to the IEP. I need to sit down with my team. I need to say, we need more. Now, it's up to them to tell you what that's like, but you still track the progress. You still make that progress moving forward, keeping in mind it's not exhaustive. So whatever it is you feel that you need, they got to come up with a way to meet that need. And when we're talking about needs and we're talking about classrooms and we're looking at parents have a tendency to go, well, I want an aide. Well, we all do. But what we want is we want my child to have assistance. And you point out from the time special education begins, from the time your child crosses the curb in the front of your house. Transportation to school, from school, in school, and around school is part of an IEP. So what's it take to get me from my house to school needs to be written in the IEP. What's it take to keep me on that bus? What assistance do I need? Then what happens when I get to school? I need assistance to get off the bus. I need assistance to get into the classroom. I need the transition. I need assistance. I need to be redirected. It's based on need. What do they need? Then you say, and how are you going to meet that need? And how are you going to report back to me that that need's being met? So it could be 3 or 4 people. But when we're looking at an aide in a classroom, What training do they need? If your child is using an augmentative communication device, they need to be trained in it because they're using it within the classroom besides the teacher. So the aide, whoever is functioning in that capacity, needs to understand the augmentative communication device. They need to be trained in a behavior plan if there is one. Who's gathering the data to make sure this is happening? All of these things are part of your IEP. And you just sit down and you go over that. And that's where, before the meeting, sitting down as parents and making that list so it's in front of you, so you do not lose focus at an IEP meeting. It's just business and you have to treat it that way. And then if you do that and everything's in writing, then you have to write one next year and the next year and the next year and the next year until it's over. But it's that process federal law says you use, and understanding the process is the best thing that you can do. Once you got, I remember coming out of a training back in the day, and I was walking out of there and I was going, it's the IEP. It's just the IEP. That's it. It's the IEP. Once I got that and understood that, then that's what brought my child back. That's what got him back into Tommy Barfield. That's what got him in education. That's what got him into college. It was understanding that procedural process over and over and over and over again. But once you understand that, and you always want to collaborate as much as you can with your team and the school that your child is in. And I always said from the very beginning, the first thing, I was my child's advocate. The second thing I was his teacher's advocate, because he was in gen ed full-time, 100%. So I would ask her, what does he need? You just tell me what he needs and I'll make sure his needs are met. So I had a really good relationship with the teacher, the gen ed teacher. I didn't dump him in her classroom and expect her to teach him. He came with an aid, he came with technology, all those related services to help him be in that gen ed setting. And Tommy Barfield was a wonderful little school down there. It was like Mayberry on the beach.
So Wilbur, what about those instances where like school personnel or district personnel isn't as friendly? What do you recommend for parents who are navigating a much more stressful relationship to create more of a team approach with the school personnel and or the district personnel? And when do they seek out district versus school?
Well, you can always move up that chain of command. The chain of command is there. The school board is your ultimate. They're responsible for the provision of FAPE in Carter County, is your school board. Underneath them is the superintendent, who carries out the wishes of the board. Then everybody else underneath that, principals, they still answer to the superintendent. So understanding at any time, if you can't resolve issues on a building basis, you go up the chain of command and talk to the superintendent. I spent many hours talking to my school board. You get 3 minutes after the school board meeting's over, comments from the public. You can put together a packet of information and send it to every board. But we have this thing called sunshine law in the state of Florida. So for that board to act on any action, they have to be together. So they have to be collective. So forget that, to get them to act, you actually have to go in front of them. And then you present information, and then public disclosure is another powerful tool, because school board meetings are televised. So the general public is out there. But the best advice that I can give any parent out there of a child with a disability is to understand that there is a disability community out there. And you become part of that disability culture, part of that disability community, and look at saying it's national. So wherever you go, there's the state of Florida for children with Down syndrome. It's Down Syndrome Association of Central Florida. They're a great group up there. They got a great dads group up there. They do good stuff. But there's a National Down Syndrome Association as well in each individual state. And so you have all of this information, and you're not the first. So despite whatever it is you're coming up against, somebody else has already done that. But in a particular school district, if I'm not getting, it's a difference night and day. And you mentioned on this earlier, from this school to this school. And it's based on the leadership of the principal in that school. So you have a principal that accepts children with disabilities, that they believe in being in gen ed and everything. That's the school I want my kid in. That's what I want. If I'm not getting it here and I'm not being felt welcome within my school, then I'm going right up that chain of command, and you'll probably see me standing in front of my school board asking them why I'm not welcome in this school. That's accountability that's out there. You know, you have those rights. My child has just as much rights simply because they have a disability to do everything that anybody else does. And too many times, because of ignorance, and that's all that is, they're not accepted, they're rejected, and they're not felt to be part of. And when you're looking at segregation and isolation, that becomes a life sentence. So I didn't want that for my kid, and it didn't happen that way. You know, he was part of gen ed the whole time, and he was a low incidence disability, even more than autism or anything else. Deaf, hard of hearing is very low. Not that many kids have it, and it's a very expensive program. So that's what the issue was funding. Wasn't anything else. They just didn't want to pay for the program. Well, they had to eventually, but in the beginning, they weren't quite so open to it. They had 5 counties. It was called the McKip group. So it was Collier, Lee, Henry, Glades, and Charlotte. All got shipped to North Fort Myers if you were hearing impaired. Until I said you can't do that anymore. Because you can't put them on a bus that long. And that formed everybody to start making their own programs, Collier included. But you have those rights. You have to understand it's your job to be the advocate.
So in closing, what message of hope would you want to impart to parents to hold on to when they're in the thick of it, of navigating their child's IEP?
Understand that these laws are 30-some years old. You're not the first, you're not the last. There's plenty of case law out there. We don't have to reinterpret. You just have to understand the procedural process and stick to it, and understand the rights that you have and all the things that you have to make it happen. And we used to say no only means we have the right to discuss it further, because it may or may not necessarily be that way. Become involved, go to the advisory meetings, understand who the players are. School board meetings are open to the public. You know, it's understand that level doesn't end here. And even in Collier County, once you're up here, you still have the state of Florida, you still have the federal government. You can go all the way to the federal government and file a complaint if you need to. It's federal law. The best thing to do is to work it out with your school if you can. But if you can't, then up that chain of command until you get to that person that can. Because no is not an option. The service you may need is probably critical for the child and may be very expensive, but cost is never a factor. And somebody else, just like you, went to court to get that right. Rachel Holland's parents lost their house because they spent all that money on attorneys. And it doesn't have to happen anymore. I sit here and I listen to things, sad as it may be, that I fought when I first started 30 years ago.
Right. And the cycle continues, and we are in the midst of breaking that up with this podcast, educating additional needs parents on how to advocate.
And there's great information out there and plenty of it. And if you can't find it, let me know and I'll show you where it's at. But it's that information that makes the difference. That's all. There's no difference between you and me, except I took that time to learn. And I've learned from great folks, legends out there. I've sit in their classes and I've listened. But that's what makes the difference is your knowledge, how much you understand that procedural process, because it's built that if it's not working, you always go back. You always go back. You know, that's why there's no limit to the number of meetings you can get a year if you need it. If your child needs something, you need to go back to the IEP meeting. If you're refusing me an IEP meeting, which no reasonable request for an IEP meeting should ever be denied, then I use my procedural safeguards and I prior written notice of your refusal to provide an IEP. And then you have to put in writing what it is you're proposing or rejecting and why, and everything else you considered and rejected before you came to this conclusion. So it's not just, you just can't say no. And this, once again, these things were put in place by parents just like us. So it's using the process. And there's a whole different set of procedural safeguards under 504. Then you have procedural safeguards under IDEA. You have two laws. Both of them are federal, but they're different branches of the government. IDEA is the Office of Special Education Programs in Washington. Section 504 is the Office for Civil Rights, U.S. Department of Education. So it's, what is it? Who interprets it? I tried in the building. I tried with my teacher first. So you always want to try on the lowest denominator you can in working with the teacher. And if the teacher doesn't do it and I can't get it with the principal, then I have to go up that chain of command and start the complaint process through the procedural safeguards, and then let that come to fruition. But just being involved, like every school has a school advisory council. So you should be part of that, the ones that are in the buildings, you know. What high school are you at?
We are at Aubrey Rogers.
Okay. So they have their advisor. You should be part of that because that makes the decision about the whole school. And when you look at that, looking at the high school and saying, is it truly accessible?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and if it's not, then we need to talk about that, you know.
Right.
And that's who that advisory.
Thank you, Wilbur, for joining me today on Down to Heal and sharing all your knowledge. And I know we could take more time. So do you have any?
Anytime.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you and all the knowledge that you have imparted to our family that has made such a difference in Jack's journey and ours. And hopefully this will make such a difference in future ones.
I am always willing to share information. I'm a sharing kind of guy that way. I have a lot of good information over on my website over there. I'm looking forward to partnership and reaching more and more parents if I can. The need is never going to be met, no matter how hard you try. As we're talking, somebody else is getting that first diagnosis.
Right.
And you remember what that was like. Your world.
I do.
Well, I do too. You know, you didn't ask for it. Nobody calls you up and goes, you know, would you like to be a parent of a child with disability? No, it just happens. And when it does, that's when you need to network with parents like you. They need to call you up. And if they go over there and look on the ESE website, I think you're listed there under one of those parent educator exceptional resources out there to help others as well. So
Yes.
you're the ones carrying it forward. You know?
Yes.
And that's good. That's good. Because I was young once, believe it or not, a long time ago, really long time ago. But I was a dad, and it was a mommy's club, and it still is today. So if you look at the whole education field in general, it's female dominated. And when you look at the parent movement, and it came about middle-aged white women advocating for their kids. That's where it came about. You big thank you, you know. But then we left dads out, and you can't do that. You just can't let them out. And you know, your husband is a tremendous
advocate. He is quite a resource as well.
And so you together, what a team. But it's not just moms. It was never meant to be just moms. It should be parents, plural. So getting dads involved. So if you're a mom out there, take this information, some that you learned today, and then sit down with dad and show them. Because dads are outcome based. We want that concrete. We don't want to go in and ask the shoes how they feel about getting shopped or go to 10 different stores. We want to walk in, get the shoes, and go out the door. That's because I'm a male and I'm outcome based. They take that same thing and they apply it to the education. And they're great at IEP meetings. I love seeing dads at IEPs. It's a good thing. And then the team together, if you prepare. So don't just show up. Because if you just show up and you're not prepared and you don't do the work on the front end, you just get what you take. And so many parents don't even show up to their IEPs anyway. They just get a document handed to them once a year. That's all they understand. But the ones that do understand are getting all the services for their kids and knowing that process. I can't say that enough. It's that procedural process set for in 2 federal laws. Once you understand that, then you bring cookies. You be nice.
And we definitely did that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Wilbur. We shall do this again.
All right. Let me know. Thank you for having me. And I'll talk to you again.
All right. For each other. Thank you for joining us on Down to Heal, a space where we don't escape the mess. We meet it with heart, with courage, with curiosity. This podcast is part of a bigger movement, of remembering that healing is relational, that community is sacred medicine, and that we rise by tending to the roots. And that real change begins by tending to what's been ignored for too long. Through Synchronicity and Additional Needs Incorporated, I walk alongside parents, practitioners, and families navigating the spaces where the system falls short and where the soul steps in. If something in this episode spoke to you, let it ripple, share it, sit with it, or simply take a breath. And remember, you're not alone. Because this, it's not just personal. It's collective. It's cultural. It's generational. It's how we build a world that holds all of us. Until next time, stay rooted in truth, stay soft in your heart, and stay down to heal.